Hello and welcome to Raj Sabha TV watching Big Picture with your host Rajat Kane. Today we are going to take up a very important issue, the human right of security force personnel. The Supreme Court has agreed to examine and hear a petition seeking protection of the rights of the armed force personnel and the security personnel in view of facing agitated and sometimes even angry civilian protesters. The petition is filed by two young women, a daughter of a retired army officer and a serving army officer. The petitioners are seeking the formulation of a policy to safeguard the rights of armed force personnel on what all could come under their ambit while discharging the duties in case of facing an unruly mob or individuals who attack them while performing their military duty. The petitioners here are citing various instances of violence against armed forces personnel, including stone pelting in Kashmir. The contention raised by petitioners also seek to examine if the cases must also be registered against the perpetrators of such violence. The Supreme Court, while agreeing to examine the plea, has sought views of the central government, Union Ministry of Defence, Jammu and Kashmir government and the National Human Rights Commission. All these four parties have been issued notice to join the issue in the court. Now, to discuss this issue in details, we're joined with Lieutenant General V.K. Saxena, Distinguished Fellow, Vivekananda International Foundation, Suhas Chakma, Director, Asian Centre of Human Rights, Neela Gokhale, Advocate, Supreme Court, and Kajal Mishra, the petitioner in this present case. Thank you all of us for joining us. We'd first like to start with Preeti Gauche. Preeti, if you could hear me, what are the contentions raised by you in your petition?
So, as stated earlier, we last February in 2018, we went to National Human Rights Commission and we wanted the protection of human rights of the armed personnel who are protecting and guarding us on the borders and also inside the country. So we wanted their rights to be, human rights to be taken into consideration. Wearing the uniforms does not take away the human rights from them. So the FIR are launched against the stone pelters and they are not taken into the further courts. So we wanted that this thing has to stop and the stone pelters should be given punishments, and not only the armed personnels are stopped from performing their duties.
Are you only citing cases pertaining to Jammu and Kashmir, or there is a larger ambit of your petition?
Yeah, so as stated earlier, that we are not only focusing on the personnels of performing their duties in Jammu and Kashmir, it is for the entire India. All the army personnel who are doing their duties inside the country and protecting us should be given the human rights.
Right. Tell me any instance that you have highlighted in a petition which you think is possibly the trigger for you filing the petition.
One of the things that we have cited that if an armed person is doing something wrong, then you go to the court and personally file the complaint you want to. And it is not that we are saying that they can do anything. They can also be punished if they have done something wrong. But the thing is that they should be treated as normal citizens of India who have their own rights and which should be protected by the government and the country. So this is the main thing that we have cited, that if a normal citizen of India files the complaint and they get to the procedure of filing an FIR, going to the higher courts. So also a human person, the armed person has also this right, the same right. So this is our main highlight, that we also want that the human rights of these armed personnel should be taken into considerations.
Did you also approach any other authorities before you filed a petition in the Supreme Court? Did you approach the state government or any statutory body which takes care of the human rights in general?
Yeah, so last year I told you in February we went to National Human Rights Commission and filed this petition. So the thing is that this was transferred to the state government, and the National Human Rights Commission did not take any action regarding this. So after that we decided that we should have some, we should go to Supreme Court, and so we filed the petition to the Supreme Court.
General Saxena, I'll start with you. How important you think such a petition is it? Our situation for the serving army personnel or any security personnel that challenging that such a petition is required to safeguard their rights?
Sir, I will start by quoting Mahakavi Tulsidas. He said, "Bade bhag manav tan pawa, sur durlabh santan gawa." These human rights emanate because we are humans. A soldier is as much human as anybody else, and therefore this petition of bringing forward an awareness that the human rights of a soldier which are being violated by a mob at the time when he is performing his legitimate duty given by the state in the confines defined by the state is something to be deliberated upon. Sir, you must have heard and must have seen on the TV hundreds of times security forces in the areas of J&K, Sofia, Pulwama and so on being stone pelted and mercilessly even beaten, and somehow you get a feeling that the soldiers' hands are tied. Why they are tied? Because if the retaliation is in terms of fire, then FIR and cases are launched against them. The height came when a soldier, Rajendra Singh, died because of stone pelting. Our chief has been very vociferous, sir. He has been telling that stone pelters are nothing. They are overground workers of the terrorists. Why they are holding a stone? Stone has not been defined as a weapon of war, but it can be as injury, it can cause death. And therefore, the soldiers who are at the receiving end, they are actually feeling very helpless. And can you imagine? It was very shocking to hear for me. A previous chief minister has stated that more than 9,000 cases of FIR against the civilians who have pelted stones will be withdrawn because they are first time offenders. Now, where is the justice? Here is a soldier who is standing in the middle of a counterinsurgency environment. He is holding a weapon which he cannot fire, and he is doing his legitimate duty of safeguarding this population, this area, this country, this nation from the insurgent, from the terrorists. And here there are civilians, there are young people who are throwing stones which can cause grievous injury. Right. And also beating people, sir. It is something very, very humiliating to see as a soldier being beaten, being humiliated in the streets where he is guarding the people.
Mr. Chakma, I'd like to come to you. I mean, you have experience in working in the area of human rights. Now, how delicate is this issue of maintaining a fragile balance? Because we've heard perspective from the armed forces, and in such a cases, there is sure shot, there is perspective on the other end as well. So how do we go for a fragile balance in such a situation?
No, I don't think it's a question of maintaining fragile balance. It's not like what's the side of the army or the other side. It's a question of interpretation of the law. What do we understand by human rights? See, ordinary crimes takes place, including murder. When somebody kills somebody, you do not call it a human rights violation. So if you look at the Protection of Human Rights Act, how is human rights defined? Human rights is defined as something which is guaranteed by the law and enforced by the courts in India and embodied in international law. So when you talk about the situation where the security forces are facing stone pelters, which is actually quite common if you look at the disproportionate use of firearms by the police all over the country while facing this kind of crowd. It's the inherent right which is given in the CRPC and other procedures where the police and the army will exercise its own inherent power. Now, if the state and the security agencies who exercise the sovereign power of the state say that we need more protection, what are you trying to say? Are you trying to say that the government of India and the edifice of the state doesn't exist? And are you going to say that, what is the duty of the stone pelter? They are criminals. Somebody who violates the law, you have to deal with the law. So if you cannot deal with the law, that's a different issue. I think I'll come back to the issue of, say, FIR. Your FIR registered. The FIR should be registered, they should be prosecuted. I think where the problem arises in India, whenever a political party comes to power, Depending on his or her exigencies, they immediately withdraw the FIRs. So is the withdrawal of the FIRs in Kashmir is an exception? Look at the UP, 20,000 cases, including the chief minister withdrawing the cases against himself, earlier Samajwadi Party withdrawing the cases himself. All over the world, all over the states of India, you see the politicians withdrawing the cases without the consent of the court. So I think we have to be clear about the concepts. Human rights violations, if you look at the NHRC, you go to file a petition in NHRC, NHRC will register a case of complaint of human rights violation only against the state forces because they exercise the sovereign power of the state. I cannot go to the NHRC for a property dispute with my neighbor because that's a private complaint. So we have to look at the concept of human rights. What is concept of human rights? Guaranteed in the Protection of Human Rights Act. So I'm a bit surprised actually how are you going to look at it. I think where there is a merit is the state government empowered to withdraw the FIRs? Obviously not. I think that's an issue which needs to be adjudicated.
That's a very big mistake, sir. A state is not a state power. Suppose I am prosecute, somebody does a offence against me. It is my right of self-defense and right to life, right to property, right to recourse to a judicial process. How can somebody withdraw an FIR? That is state party, it's a third party. It is between the offender and the victim.
Right. For further interpretation of intricacies, Neela, ma'am, in such a case, how do you proceed with the argument in the court of law? Do we have a policy, existing policy, which safeguards rights of the armed force personnel while they're facing unrest or, for that matter, protesters, which are civilian?
See, our points before the court are two. One is that whenever an FIR is lodged, we have no grievances, my daughter and her friends.
We're not getting into the merits of the case. Let me also make it very clear.
Exactly. So without going into the merits, what disturbed us was when a Jawan had a rifle in his hand, but he could not retaliate because he was afraid if he retaliates, some FIR is going to be filed against him. So the legality of the issue is this: once an FIR has been filed against a perpetrator of violence, whether that FIR can be withdrawn as a stated policy of a government without recourse to the courts of law, number one. And number two is when these petitioners had approached the Human Rights Commission in Delhi, the National Human Rights Commission, the National Human Rights Commission had issued notice to the MOD as well as the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Now, the state comes and files a reply saying that we have our own state commission, so you do not have jurisdiction. And surprisingly, the National Human Rights Commission closes that file and transfers it to the State Human Rights Commission. That is where the problem arises, because if you see the Human Rights Commission Act, they have full jurisdiction to investigate and inquire into complaints of human rights violation made by an armed forces personnel. So, but when it comes to any complaint made by an armed forces personnel, then suddenly why should it go to the state commission? They are employers of the government. They act in the name of the President of India. So if at all, instead, in fact, through your channel, I would just like to even bring out this point that as an individual, I feel that individually soldiers or any armed forces personnel should not have to pick up cudgels for himself or his forces. It should be the collective conscience of the society as a government who must protect these people and who must have a stated policy in respect of a mechanism or some sort of a machinery to deal with such issues.
Mr. Chakma, is there a requirement of a mechanism for armed force personnel? Because we have seen these cases not just only in Kashmir. Kashmir, we understand there are certain other factors, but also, say for that matter, in other states, we have seen sometimes the protest getting out of hand. So, is there any safeguard for the police, armed forces, paramilitary, or other state apparatus personnel?
See, the state force, when a particular armed forces are deployed in a state, they operate under the control or the guidance of the state government because they are in aid of the civil administration there.
Right.
So the criminal procedure code is very clear under what circumstances the armed forces, the police or any sovereign state agency can exercise powers including shoot to kill. It's not that given in the act. So if you have already been given the power to shoot to kill in self-defense, including under the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, what are you asking for? If somebody is fearful that there will be criminal prosecution, if he is going to be, FIR is going to be filed against him, what kind of intervention Supreme Court can make? My argument is very clear. The army or the paramilitary forces have the widest powers, including to take away the life. What powers you need more? Because it's not only in Jammu and Kashmir. If you look at earlier, in fact, the entire farmer protest in Rajasthan used to be very violent. Look at the Jat protest. Look at the kind of protest when Ram Rahim was arrested. You know, I mean, it's a common phenomenon in India that, you know, protest and violent, and how you will deal with it, you know, it's not a new phenomenon. Why only in Kashmir? Even in areas where you do not have any insurgency, immediately they turn violent, and the police often, without any respect for the guidelines of the criminal procedure code, actually resort to this proportionate use of firearms. And you can never find a prosecution for that, because it's very difficult to see, you know, adjudicate for the court, you know, in what circumstances you have used the force.
Right, right. We'll come back to the prosecution, but that's very important. Sir, I mean, you think situation for armed force personnel, I'm not just talking about the case specific of Jammu and Kashmir rally, but in general has changed, that things have become far more challenging. Is it so? Considering they also have safeguard of AFSPA, still there is a requirement for further safeguards?
Sir, the requirement of safeguard and the requirement of reaction against stone pelting are slightly different. They're shade different.
Okay.
As sir has just brought out, that the law of the land gives adequate power to the security forces acting in aid to civil authorities. For example, a situation going out of hand, a mob working, he gave an example of Ram Rahim, and so on and so forth. What is the situation there? The situation is that there was a situation which went out of hand of the civilian agencies. It came, the armed forces were called, and they have a right to take life. They have a right to bring the situation under control. Now look at this situation of stone pelting. It is a very peculiar and an unequal situation. Now here is that security forces are carrying out their legitimate duty in a counterinsurgency operation. Suddenly a crowd of young people who are not armed by the standard of arms in which they are, they come and start injuring, throwing such grievous stones at this thing. Now what happens? Should we exercise the same power by taking the life? You know, like you see in the many videos of the Chinese and the Israelis, they actually use firearms against a stone pelter. But here, what is the, as Madam has brought out, what is the issue here? The issue here is of inequality. The issue here is, one, if I use my firearm, if I take the life of the other person, what comes on me then? What comes on me is that he has killed an unarmed person, innocent person. FIR is launched against me, and I have to save. Therefore, what happens? Here is the situation. The situation is of constraint. The situation is exercise constraint. Our chief has gone on record even to tell, when we are talking sternly, that we will not kill, but we can injure, in the sense that if a stone pelter is throwing a stone at us and killing a Jawan, he went as far ahead as killing a Jawan. You heard the case of Major Gogoi, what he did. An action in which he demonstratedly, without taking anybody's life, controlled a situation. But here the case of stone pelting is different, sir. The case of stone pelting is on the safety and security of the Jawans, of the soldiers, after they have used their firearms. That is the issue.
Ma'am, I would like to listen from you. In this petition specific, are you seeking any amendments in the existing framework of AFSPA, or you're seeking a fresh policy concerning situation in a certain place?
That's right. What we are seeking is, I have not asked for any amendment. They have not asked for any amendment in the present act. What we are asking is that let the governments act in aid of already legislated enactments. There is a CRPC, there is a IPC. If any perpetrator of violence has been caught or has an FIR against him, let the law take its course.
Right.
Please don't intervene and withdraw cases, because that demotivates the troops, that demoralizes the troops, and then nothing. They are obstructed from doing their discharge of duty. So that's our only prayer, and we are seeking that the National Human Rights Commission should actually investigate and submit a report.
Right.
Actually, there are three major steps.
I'll just come to you, sir. Yes, sir. You
I
wanted
think
to say something.
we have to understand that the National Human Rights Commission does not have the actual jurisdiction of the Jammu and Kashmir, and we ourselves have lodged so many complaints with the
What
NHRC.
about the state Human
So
Rights
it's
Commission?
State
Does it
Human
have-
Rights Commission which has the jurisdiction. In
Right.
fact, as per the Human Rights Protection Rule at the moment, if the State Human Rights Commission intervenes fast anywhere in the country, National Human Rights Commission actually cannot intervene. I think what we have to realize is that's a complex situation, because in one side there is no denying that the security forces face hostile, massive crowd. But on the other hand, you also see, the use of the force, including the firearms, the kind of, bullets which we have used. It has its own versions on the other side of the, Kashmir. We cannot deny that fact. So you cannot have it's a conflict situation. You are never going to have a clear-cut situation that this is the way it can actually run through.
Right. So is it a conflict situation, so there is no clear-cut solutions to it, you think so?
Sir, there will be a clear-cut. Why not a clear-cut solution? Because once the petitioners have asked 3 specific things, they've said that they direct the respondents to formulate a policy. What is the policy? The policy should be, like for example, if an FIR is launched, it cannot be withdrawn. So a policy for the protection of human rights violation against security personnel, that is the first step. Secondly, they have said that NHRC in its order of 4th January 2019, they have transferred a case of this petition to State Human Rights Commission and say that there is lack of jurisdiction, and State Human Rights Commission is not taking the adequate amount of action. And what happens? So their petitions have therefore asked that till the time the Supreme Court, Honorable Supreme Court and the respondents formulate a policy, let the NHRC continue to investigate, continue to do the investigation of the cases which they have given. So sir, there is there is a clear-cut formula. This procedure, as sir has brought out, learned, my colleague has brought out, it is not an easy game. It's a conflict situation in which there can be firearms against firearm, in which the equation is clear. There can be stone against firearm, in which there is a equation of somebody can say, I am unarmed, I am holding a stone. Stone is not a weapon, not defined as a weapon of war. Here, how can you fire at me? I lodge a FIR against you. Here is the question of saving the life and limb. Sir, if you make a soldier unsure of his actions because of his own safety, he also has a family, he also has a life. If I deal with a stone pelter the way externally a soldier should deal, and I know tomorrow I am standing in a court of law protecting my own being as why did I use a firearm, and then I will be unsure about me. That's why you see so many soldiers, you see so constrained to do. Sir, it is a humiliation to see on the screen the stone pelters harassing our Jawans, the ones whom they are protecting.
Right.
But the final point which I wanted to say is, the Armed Forces Special Powers Act makes it very clear that you cannot initiate any legal proceedings against the armed forces deployed, in Jammu and Kashmir, the central government forces. And Section 321 of the CAPC in India and Ranveer Penal Code actually says it very clearly that only with the permission of the court you can withdraw the FIR. Now, if these laws cannot bring the change, the situation on the ground, a particular policy is not going to be, bring. If the law cannot bring the changes, if the law, despite empowering you, cannot bring the situation, please don't expect a policy which is a general direction is going to change the situation. It doesn't work that way.
Right. Ma'am, last word to you. I mean, just wrapping up the show, you think that any policy would be enough to safeguard rights of the armed force personnel as well as balance that there is no civilian human right violation?
See, perhaps if like Mr. Chakna said, if the law is not enough, then a policy definitely would not be. But what I want to tell him, and through you to your viewers, that there cannot be a policy of withdrawing FIRs against perpetrators of violence.
Right.
So if there is a policy that as a policy we are going to withdraw cases, surely then there will be that has to be countered. And you cannot expect an armed forces, a Jawan who's been injured by a stone while doing his duty, to go to court or go to a Human Rights Commission and make a complaint. It is the collective it is the government of India who has to pick up cudgels for these because they act in the name of the President of India. He is the Commander-in-Chief. So therefore, it is for the government of India to actually make some mechanism, whether by policy or whether by making the implementation of the laws very strict, to take some action against the perpetrators and not just give them amnesty. That was the point of the petition, and I'm sure the Supreme Court will address it in that perspective.
Right. So,
sir, I was just thinking that if law was enough, then why Honorable Supreme Court accepts a petition of formulation of a policy? They must have seen a lacuna. I am trying to say as a soldier, I am operating in J&K in a counterinsurgency environment. I am being hit by stones. What is my safety of using my firearms against a stone pelter to the satisfaction that tomorrow I will not be held responsible for the actions which I took on behalf of the state.
Very briefly,
Very
just wrapping
briefly,
up.
the government doesn't have the right to withdraw the FIRs. There is a case which Supreme Court must adjudicate whether the withdrawal of the FIR was a normal procedure without the sanction of the court, or actually have gone through the entire judicial process.
FIR in the state.
Yeah, FIR in the state, and it was done by the PDP BJP government together.
Right. So there we have. So I'm sorry, we have to wrap it up here. It was great discussion. So clearly, it's a big issue, important issue. That having safeguards of SPA, is it just enough, or perhaps a larger policy is required for armed force personnel and security force personnel who have of late faced an increasing protest, endangering their own life in the line of service. Thank you for watching Big Picture.